Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome here. Today I'm going to talk about an interesting subject about how to effectively measure success in projects. So I think everyone has come across that point in a project where you're wondering, are we actually delivering the project effectively within the timescales and with what clients want and what users want? I think it's important to understand, is there actually a problem? And what is that problem? How do you actually try to solve that problem? What kind of things we should focus on to ensure delivery on projects? As you all have different roles on projects, each person has a different idea about what they should focus on, and I'm going to try to provide some clarity on that. And then, which metrics exist out there to measure success effectively? And lastly, I'm going to run through, out of my experience and the experience of BBD, what worked well, what did not work well from all our experience in delivering projects successfully. Okay, so I'm a bit of an academic, so I always go look at statistics first to go and find out, is there actually a problem in the world? Do we have issues with delivering projects successfully? And there was a sample done on 5,400 IT projects, and the stats were actually quite shocking to me. So, 45% of these projects overrun on cost. 7% time overrun, 56% less value delivered. Meaning, at the outset of the project, there was an idea that the stakeholders had, what they wanted to deliver, and that just doesn't get done. And some of these cost overruns and time overruns actually has the effect where clients could become bankrupt because of them. That's how large they become. So that's definitely a problem. And I thought to myself, okay, cool, I'm going to be even more academic and go and think about, okay, maybe the sample's a bit small. Maybe it's a small sample bias, and and the statistics of the sample isn't representative of the population. So I went to look at a bit larger sample. So this is over 175,000 IT projects, and you'll see the same kind of trends emerged. 31% of projects get cancelled before they finish. 58% less value delivered, same trend. And only 16% of these projects were completed within time, within scope, and on budget. So then I thought, that wasn't really my experience. I always feel, in South Africa we're a bit better. And then I went and looked at a sample in South Africa, and I actually got a very, very small sample, difficult to get data on it, but there was a sample done, a study done on 200 IT projects in South Africa. So this is quite high net worth projects where there's lots of money spent onto it. So in the banking and insurance verticals and so forth. And it's the same trend again. 27% of these projects failed. 36% of them were challenged, meaning they didn't deliver on the requirements at the outset, or they overran on cost or time, and only 37% were successful. So we were better. We were almost double as better as the international standard, but remember, this is a small sample. So then I thought to myself, okay, great, so there must be reasons. We've gone through this history of projects, and these studies have been conducted over many years. And I went and looked at, why are we failing to deliver? So if you guys had to guess, what's the number one reason why we're failing? Anyone? Hey, put up your hand and you can... Igor? Planning. Okay. I also thought so. Okay, so when I actually went and evaluated it, it's actually the number one reason is missing focus. So that means, business and IT is not aligned. Business stakeholders have an idea of what they want to accomplish. They want to accomplish certain strategic objectives, and then there's really a disconnect between those objectives and the alignment within the IT team of what to deliver. So that's a bit of a problem, okay? Lack of business focus. So this one also came to as a bit of a shock. I've had experience with it somewhat, but business users or business people kind of stepping out of the process, saying, okay, great, you guys are doing the project, we are paying you to do this project, and they don't have the clear focus that's needed and involvement to make it a success. And then you'll see some of the other things that I think you all, it's been echoed on projects that's under threat or under risk. Things like unrealistic schedules, planning, Reactive planning is quite a big problem, not proactively steering the project in the right direction, even though there are red flags. And then the common one, shifting requirements. And then lastly, technical complexity. In South Africa, very much of the same. Business IT not aligned, lack of business focus, shifting requirements, and then also which came out of the study, which I think we should have come out of any other study, and maybe it speaks to shifting requirements is user involvement. And I think that's the one biggest, from when I started working in IT, that's the biggest shift that's actually come across in the analysis sphere, is actually the focus on the user. So you'd think, we've had so many new methodologies that's been invented to assist us in managing projects. So we should be getting better. And I thought we must be getting better. We've got Agile, we have Scrum, Kanban boards, and all of these mechanisms to help us and assist us in steering projects. And a poll was done to executives, and the question was asked, are there more failures now? Do you feel there's more failures now than there were 5 years ago and 10 years ago? And you'll see the trend actually increased. People feel that the projects are failing more. If you go look at the stats on the previous studies I've done, you go look at more recent or previous studies, you also see the numbers are showing a trend where we're actually getting worse at delivery. And then I thought, okay, well, this has been going on for a long time, possibly, but how long, And it's not really a new problem, which was quite a surprise to me. I didn't know about this, and then the first time I saw this word, software crisis. So this term was coined in 1968, and that was the first time somebody mentioned this at a presentation, and it was actually in Germany. And the trend that caused them to start talking about a software crisis is essentially computing power increased tremendously, and it allowed us to solve more complex business solutions as the computing power increased. What happened next was, people weren't able to define what the problem was clearly enough to solve them. And there was no clear focus or guidelines from development principles perspective or from a software methodology perspective, because there was no area or domain knowledge since it never existed before. And what happened is the cost of hardware and stuff started to decrease, and we had an exponential increase in the cost of development of software. And they defined this wicked problem. The wicked problem, essentially, to summarize, is being able to clearly define the problem for people to fix it. And that's why they actually created a whole new area of expertise, which is software engineering, trying to fix problems. Okay. So, you have to also go think about, okay, are we focusing on the right stuff? Because you're a role player on a project, what should you be focusing on? So, if you start at the top, CIOs. So, they care about the things, and I think you're all familiar with these types of concepts. They want business and IT to be aligned. They want to cut costs. They want to make sure that they get their product to market at the right time before their competitors and with what their users want. And essentially, they want to make sure that the return on investment gets generated. So, obviously, a massive spend on IT. You want to make sure that you're actually getting a return on this investment. So they don't necessarily care about requirements, and that's something that's sometimes missed. But it's important to understand that requirements are the enablers to actually align IT and business and to facilitate the drivers of ROI, so return on investment. So there's various quantitative and qualitative factors to evaluate on return on investment. So, it's not as easy to do if you think about it. So, you can ask yourself some questions to guide you when you're writing requirements. How is my requirements relating to the strategic objectives of the project? Do you even know what the strategic objectives are before you start writing a document? If you go think about return on investment drivers, those are things that generally drive revenue, sales, profit, or cut cost in some way. So you can go ask yourself, this requirement that I'm writing, how is this facilitating and increasing customer sales? So these are different types of metrics that you can use or guidelines to actually make sure that your requirements are correct. Okay, project managers, and I think everyone's also quite familiar with these. He's got to make sure that the ship is running smoothly, which is not as easy as it sounds. You have to check that you're on time, within budget, with the scope that's promised at the outset of the project, and if your team is happy, otherwise you're not going to achieve any of the above. So, an easy way to actually go and summarize this when you have stakeholder meetings is to go use something like a RAG report. So this is a nice and simple metric. This is one we used at a previous client. And essentially what it tells you in a snapshot what's going on the project. And essentially most stakeholders or most people managing projects, they care about, is this project at risk? Or, is the risk medium or high? Or is it on track? That's all they want to know. And then they want to know what's wrong, if something is wrong, and who's going to address it. How are we going to mitigate these risks? So this is a nice summary that you could use to possibly facilitate that. So also just on the RAG status, so red, amber, green, the worst aspect of your project should dictate what your status is. So if your team's unhappy, then essentially your project's in red, because you're going to have problems. You have to mitigate those risks. So something's missing here. Okay, so we understand how project management works. We understand what different stakeholders are looking at, but we're still failing. So what's missing? So now I've found that the big thing that's missing is actually the focus on the product. We need to ensure that project management factors that facilitate the project management cycle running smoothly, and the project factors that ensure that the product is successful are aligned. And you can't really shy away from one or the other. So the correlation between project success and project success is relatively low. Meaning, you could have a very successful project from a project management perspective, but if your product fails, you failed. You haven't delivered the value that's required to users. Project failure. So we need value. We need to go and assess value. In other words, you have to go ask things like, what's the effect? More customers, more sales. Is the solution we're building a quality solution, and is it sustainable? Can we easily go and change the solution as times progress? And is it something that users would want to use? So that's an important point. I think that's something that we've actually experienced in a project we did for a large Cape Town-based insurance company, where it was a 200 million rand project, and essentially it was supposed to be able to facilitate you to buy your own insurance. Okay, so you can go online and choose, I want option A. For car insurance, it's the cheapest option, great. There you go. And in one of the presentations on the run-up of this project, one of the brokers got up and he said, guys, this is not going to work because insurance is actually sold, not bought. Everybody thought, what's this guy talking about, whatever. Went along further down the project, and eventually they built this whole system for 200 million rand and they had no users. Zero adoption rate. Massive problem. Okay, so that's just an example. Okay, so focus on users. If you focus on users, you have to track what users do. You have to go and find metrics that show you how users interact with applications and where you could improve your application. And this goes through from the initiation of the project, the upfront research, which is usually not done to the extent needed, up to the end of the project when you go and evaluate and you deliver this product to see whether this project was successful and whether you did deliver value to users. So I just jotted some of these things down. Drop-off rate in a business process. If you have something like signing up for a product and you have 50 steps, you need to go and track where the users are falling off. If your competitor only has 3 steps, you're going to have a problem. You're not going to get users signing on. You can go track these things, Google Analytics, all that type of stuff. In-app surveys, that's the nice and easy one. So after this app's live, you can really go and ask the user, after completing a certain task, rate this task out of 5. Was it easy to complete? Was it difficult to complete? So you can have a quick feedback mechanism, and that's an important thing, throughout the SDLC. Okay, so even if you're in UAT, you can do these type of things. UX interview and review. So UX interviews are important for me because it kind of tells you whether you're on the right track to what you're trying to deliver. So for instance, you're trying to build something that captures a guy's name, and you have an idea of what kind of fields is needed or anything to that effect. If you go to a user interview before that with your prototypes, even before you start the development, you can use papers for this, anything like that. And that will give you an indication of how you should adjust. And that's also part of the continuous feedback loop. UX review, a little bit different. So after you start building your app and you start iterating through the different aspects of your application, you can essentially go sit with the user and ask them to perform certain tasks. And you can go and record them on video and actually evaluate where they're going wrong. Because a lot of the times, the users don't know that they're going wrong, or they don't know that they don't like something, or that something is difficult. But you can actually go and evaluate it when you do a video interview with somebody to perform tasks and see where they're dropping off. Okay, number of fixed to complete tasks. So this is something that we actually implemented on a trading solution we were building. And on trading, if you're a high-frequency trader or an advanced trader, number of clicks is a big thing. You want to capture 0 data. The system should know what value you're going to trade at, and you want to do one-click trades. That's the benchmark. So, I mean, if you're about 3 or 4 clicks, you already lost a large percentage of your user base or interest in your application. Okay, so there's many metrics that exist. So there's some old ones and some new ones. I think I haven't ever been on a project, Agile or not, where I didn't have to draw up a Gantt chart. So Gantt charts, why do people use Gantt charts? Well, firstly, it's easy to use. It's easy to adopt. It's easy to understand. And the nice thing about it is it kind of tells you exactly what the project scope is. It breaks down all the features that you're developing in a logical structure, and it assigns those pieces of work to your team, and you know exactly where the start to completion times are for any aspect of the project. But there are some hiccups here. Okay, so once your project becomes very complex, especially if you're starting working on large enterprise applications, and you have different facets of the development process, like design, analysis, testing, all of these type of things, it becomes onerous to actually manage this. It becomes difficult to view exactly where we are. People don't keep it up to date. And then eventually it starts just not getting updated, and you move on. So it doesn't really accommodate change too easily, because you're going to effectively have to change the entire spreadsheet every time something changes. Okay, so there must be something new. And then Agile came to light. And Agile has given us a set of tools which can be used to evaluate projects in various ways. Okay, so I'm just going to go through some of these. This is a sprint burndown. Now, a sprint burndown is essentially, it pretty much shows you the amount of work that needs to be completed in a sprint. And as the sprint progresses, it shows you how far your team have actually completed the pieces of work. So the important thing about metrics is you have to not just go through the motions of using this, because a lot of teams just, okay, we're tracking sprint burndown. You must go and look at the anti-patterns that exist. And then it gives you certain pieces of information to which you have to react. So if you go look at this sprint burndown, you'll see there from the 12th to the, 15th, 16th May, so that's about 4 days, where there was no value delivered. None of the sprints were completed. Why did that happen? You have to go and discuss this with your team. Possibly, a possibility could be the solution or the piece of work that they wanted to do had unforeseen complexities. And then you can ask yourself the question, how can we in future better determine how to unpack these complexities before we start? Another thing that could happen is you could have rapid drops or not complete your sprint burndown, meaning you might have committed to too much work in the sprint. You have to maybe go revisit your estimation practices of sizing stories and pieces of work. So, I mean, this is cool and everything, but as Agile Go, it promotes, controlled rework and so forth. So how does this really help you with that scenario? Well, it doesn't, until they come up with the alternative sprint burndown. So the alternative sprint burndown essentially is the same thing, but as soon as there's any injections into the sprint, it shows managers and the stakeholders, what's the cost of this injection into the sprint? And that's something that's sometimes missed. And I never had a way to actually depict that to somebody, to say, listen here, I always had a feeling it's taking longer, but why? And this metric actually allows you to go add negative story points into the sprint as injections are made. And you can go and draw trend lines as to what the actual effect is of switching context within a sprint. So you'll see here, there's a blue trend line here, which goes up into, it meets the normal sprint burndown trend line at sprint 17. So you would have been done at sprint 12, and now you're only going to be done in sprint 17 just because of context switching. So, I mean, that will make users in the project understand what the cost is associated with switching context in a sprint. And it speaks to controlling any additions of work. Okay, so Epic and release burndown, that's a little bit more of a global view on the project. It shows you, how much work is left for all the features and epics in the sprint. And it pretty much, again, you can go look at the anti-patterns. Things like, the work completed is getting outpaced by the work injected overall. So, I mean, from an epic or future level, that could show you that the problem that the business users are trying to solve isn't well understood. Because why are we changing epics and features? That's a huge change, We're creating whole new sets of functionality that wasn't anticipated. Velocity is something that most sprint teams use, and I think it's the go-to metric. Essentially, it gives you a benchmark of how much work a team is able to deliver based on previous deliveries. So you go through the first sprint. So initially, you will not have a velocity chart. After the first or second iteration, you will be able to have a set of data of how much story points did this team deliver in the last 2 sprints. And now you have an average. Great. Now you can start planning and packing your sprints to that effect. So if you have an average of 50 story points, if I go back 50 story points worth of stories into the sprint, we should be able to complete it. But again, you have to go look at the anti-patterns. So I mean, if you see here on the second one, sprint 2, the work completed is much less than the anticipated work that was completed. Okay, so that's a trend. So why did that happen? Again, it comes to speaking about, are we estimating these things correctly? Again, was there additional complexities? How do we alleviate those issues? And again, you can also look at certain higher trends. Over time, you should become more efficient at delivering the amount of work that you could do. I mean that you should have sharing knowledge sharing in the team, context sharing, and as the domain knowledge grows, you should be becoming more effective. So you can easily see if this trend, your average amount of work that you could do, your velocity is decreasing over time, that's definitely a red flag. You should be getting better. Control charts, essentially, I kind of like this measurement or this metric because it gives you like the just of the just. It shows you for any pieces of functionality, story, feature, or groups of functionality, how long did this take us to develop from start to finish? Okay, so this is a metric measured in days. Looks a little bit crazy, but essentially what it gives you, it tells you for this piece of functionality, and you go benchmark this against another piece of functionality, why did the one take me 10 days and the other one took me 3 days to develop? So essentially you want this trend to be coming down. Okay, so you want your cycle times to be improving. Again, knowledge sharing is important. Becoming better at resolving defects or defining the solution, you should be becoming better at these aspects. Okay. So any erratic movements in these type of metrics is usually a pattern of something. You have to go and investigate exactly what is the problem being shown to you by that pattern. Okay, cumulative flow diagrams. So this essentially speaks to evaluating the work in progress of your solution. So you want the flow of colors to be smooth from left to right. And as soon as you have a bubble in color, it means that something's wrong. There might be a bottleneck. For instance, adding of work or the amount of work that's in progress. That's a problem. Okay? You can go extend this logic into something like a Kanban board, which I use a lot. And what's nice about looking at something like this in a sprint is you immediately know what's wrong. I mean, if you look at this, if you had to guess what's wrong, there's QA testing has a massive backlog. We're not getting through the QA testing. Why not? Do we have enough testers? Why is the testing not automated? These are questions that get highlighted to you by something like a Kanban board. Okay, and it shows you exactly also what aspect of the project. Is it development, testing, design? Defect removal effectiveness. This essentially is a metric which shows you whether you are building a quality solution. How many are we actually finding defects before we deploy into production? And some of the best companies in the world, something like Google, they're sitting here at 95%. And the average project is here about 85 to 90%. So the longer it takes to identify defects, the more costly it becomes. I don't know if you've ever heard that. But essentially, you want to make sure that your testing is so rigorous and that your quality of work that you're deploying is so good that you're actually at the upper echelons of this measurement. Don't make them wait. Average fixed time. So this is also cool metrics. It's actually combined with, things like the defects that we fixed in the previous sprint. Are they coming back, or did we do a good job at fixing those? So you'll see here that the defects found, if that is actually increasing, and the time you're taking to fix it is longer, that's obviously a trend. Did we fix the defect, or did we not? Or this is a new defect. And over time, it should be declining. So you'll see there's a trend line on the average fixed time. You'll see, hey, we're improving, woohoo. So that's essentially what you want. Okay, so across all these metrics, you have to just take something away here, is make sure that you understand the metrics. You have to pair the metrics that you use with the outcome that you're trying to control. So make sure it's fit for purpose. It should assist you in predicting when things go wrong so that you can go and react to those situations and drive the project in the right direction. Okay, so quickly, things that worked for me and did not work for me. So this is something I used. We were actually building a payments and collection system where I thought about, if I knew this before I started, it would have saved a lot of effort on our behalf. And it's actually measuring how long it takes from the sign-off date of the requirements to the actual sign-off date of the requirements. It's a weird concept. You think if a requirement is signed off, we can start. That's not what happens. Okay, so you can go and actually measure. And the longer this drags out, the bigger red flag it becomes. So essentially, we were building a payments and collection system, and we were building this quoting clients on how much it's going to cost to use the system. And we had the requirements, and they didn't sign it off, and we thought, okay, well, we have to start this project. We have to start development. And we started, we built the screens, and 6 months down the line, we were still building the screens. And that was, I think, the third iteration, as these requirements were continuously changing. They were never signed off. Okay, so that's something you could use. Prioritize features without dependencies and track dependencies. So this is something that came across on the trading platform we were developing. The first meeting we had was actually to enable digital ID. So that's something that you use to sign into any part of the banking applications with the same username and password. Sounds simple enough. And essentially, we should get this functionality for free to plug into our trading application when you log in. And the guy said it's ready. We had a few requirements. And then we actually put this on the backlog and said, okay, cool, as soon as they're ready, we'll integrate. And it was a great decision because 3 years later, when we were all ready with everything was ready except for digital ID, even though it was the first thing that was supposed to be ready at the initiation of the project. So if we didn't prioritize that correctly, imagine the outfall. We would have been sitting maybe 2-3 months waiting for this integration and not completing this piece of work. And then if you didn't complete it and it's in production, obviously you've delivered nothing. Okay, measure actual benefits delivered to users and business. So this is something that I used also on a different trading application. It was a mobile app where we had some objectives at the initiation of the project where we wanted to, we had some ideas of what the effect was. What's going to be the adoption rate of this application? Who's going to adopt it? How much money are we actually going to make? So we had some estimates in mind. And initially we thought, great, for user onboarding is going to be massive. We're going to double our user base versus our web platform, which was I don't think it was the wrong idea. It was a bit overzealous. But what happened actually was that the adoption rate by users was only 10% of the originally estimated user base, but the nature of the user, the profile of the user was of a professional trader, and the trading volumes were immense. These guys were trading 50, 60 times a day with huge volumes, and it had a massive impact on the revenue stream for the bank. So that's just something to take away. You measured success, this is what happened. When I ever get back to it, profiling the application against the user base would be something that I really focus on to ensure that we are delivering the objectives and the direct client that we're trying to serve. And then obviously, we will be better at predicting how much money are we going to make out of this. What's the effect going to be? Feature sign-off percentage versus total. So this is a black and white measure where you can say, if we've demoed functionality to a client at the end of the sprint and it's signed off, you go divide that by something simple as how many features are left in the backlog, that's the quickest measurement to say what's the percentage of completion in your project. Okay, there's no other measure. If you don't have it into production or in an environment where business users have used it and signed it off, you're not done. Okay, it's not done. So we as BBD, we've been doing this for 30 years, and we must have learned something. Why are we good at delivery? And I actually had some interviews with some of the people that has a lot of experience with delivering software in our company, and I interviewed them and asked them this exact question. And this is what came out of it. So the first thing that came out, it's not about process, frameworks, and tools. So what does that mean? So we've had all these tools changing over time, all these methodologies changing over time. But what's different in BBD? Why do we still continue to deliver? We don't prescribe to any specific tools. So essentially it came down to we foster a delivery culture. We ensure that the people that we hire have the attitude to fit that profile. And that's essentially a key driver of why we're good at delivery. All the teams deliver in different ways. There's no specific methodology that we subscribe to. But even before the term Agile was coined, we already adopted some Agile principles. Okay, things like quality, iterating through work, and controlling changes. Something else that came up was each project is unique. So you can pretty much get two different types of projects. The one is the very small project with a limited budget and tight timelines. So what BBD is good at is actually making clients understand what is actually possible in that time frame. What is it actually what they want us to deliver, and do they understand what they want us to deliver? So we're very good at extracting that information. And we're actually quite forceful with that information, ensuring that they agree that that is the route things should take. Conversely, you get things like massive multinational projects or massive software projects where you have unlimited budget, and essentially the business owners hand it over to you and say, we want everything, make it happen, here's the money. And they step out. So in that type of scenario, BBD is good at actually telling them, listen, this is not how we should address this. We should maybe go in with a smaller team, not 200 people, let's take a team of 10 people. We go focus on one piece of functionality and see how quickly we can deliver this for you. And making sure that what we are delivering is what your users want and what your users need. Delivery is not about software. Okay, so delivery is not about software. The technical implementation of a solution, it is complex. You need a lot of knowledge, and I'm not taking anything away from software developers. But the big problem exists where we have to define to them, need to show them what to develop. Which problem are we fixing? And BBD is very good at extracting what we have to deliver to clients and explaining that in an easy, understandable way to our developers to do. And then lastly, delivery is the perspective of the stakeholders in the project. So this is something that I also wish I knew a little bit earlier, but essentially, the promises you make at the initiation of the project with the stakeholders that's managing the project, if you live up to those promises continuously throughout the project, then essentially your project is a success. Okay, but to ensure that you're aligned is the problem. And that's something that you should definitely focus on. Okay, great. Thank Thanks, guys. I hope you learned something.